have some fun. Hi, this is Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Prithvi Kini and Jashid Hameed, close, the co-founders of Nuvedo. Thank you. Prithvi and Jashid, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you both doing today? You guys doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing
great.
pretty good. Yeah.
In the midst of the incoming summer, so things are getting pretty hot, and mushrooms not feeling very good. But yeah, doing well.
Wait, so where are you two based?
So we're based in Bangalore, India, which is in the state of Karnataka, down south. Yeah.
So what does that mean if it's just about to be summertime? What is the previous season? Because I'm guessing it's not winter if you're down south.
I think Bangalore is one of those places that slightly has a better elevation. So in South, so that's also the reason that we set up a business here. So there is a sort of a winter, but I don't think it's anything close to a proper winter. The temperatures around like 16, 17 degrees,
Okay.
but like yeah, right before this was sort of a winter.
Sort of
If
a
you could
winter.
Yeah,
call
if you
it.
want to call it that.
Good enough for me. Prithvi, can we start with you? Can we just get a little bit of your background, and then Jashid will go to you second. Is that okay?
So, I come from a philosophy background. I did philosophy in my undergrad, and I chose that after kind of moving away from three predetermined paths that the Indian education system kind of chalks out for you, which is medicine, engineering, or law. And I said, okay, I really don't want to be doing this, and I'm not sure if I'm cut out for it at this stage. I mean, I want to be able have the option of exploring. And I think that was a very, very good decision I took back when I was 18. And after that, of course, I went on to, work at a science company because I was still fascinated, with science and tech and all of that, and spent, the first few years of my life working with a science-based kind of sort of, research company. And then I said, okay, all this is great, but I want to be able to work in small teams and create, tangible impact. So I moved to Bangalore, and at that time, I started working with a startup. And that's where I think, startups and smaller teams and, working in a manner that was agile really hit me. And I worked in the tech space, both in the space of bioengineering and quantum cybersecurity, which is really the deep end of tech for a while. Helped kind of set up a few startups in that space, and very challenging, very exciting. And all that was great, but I think at some point I was also like, you know, we can build all this and we can have tons of tech, but at the end of the day we have to eat and we have to survive. And I think the ideas of sustainability and of course being able to not just using it as a buzzword, but like truly being able to have understand food systems was something that was really of interest to me. So went on to look at permaculture and also understand how in India we're looking at growing food. And that's when I chanced upon mushrooms, and I think they were very interesting space to work with. And that's how at that time I kind of Joshua was, I mean, I guess that's where our points intersected and we kind of met each other. And I think that would be a good segue into your story, and then maybe we can talk about how we
Perfect.
came into. Yeah.
Go for it.
So yeah, I think I'm the polar opposite of Prithvi. I took one of the three predetermined paths. I went down the engineering paths in one of the top universities in the country. Did the whole, yeah,
Did
got
what you were
all
supposed
the
to do.
boxes checked. Yeah, exactly. Then did manufacturing engineering. Figured out that wasn't really what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, I was like, okay, what do you do after being and becoming an engineer in India? You go on to take an MBA, right, in
Right.
one of the IIMs, one of the top institutes in the country. So went on to part B of that story. Went and did an MBA in one of the top universities. Tick that off the list, and after that, joined an one of the big conglomerates here, which is in fast fashion. I worked with them in the retail space as an operations manager for close to 4 years.
Okay.
So I was handling their P&L for like 25 stores
Oh,
in
wow.
South India across multiple states. I did that for 3, 4 years, and then all the newness sort of started wearing off. And
Yeah.
as somebody who really loved nature and was really into outdoor sports and sustainability and things like that, I think the impact of my action it started hitting me. I was working in one of the most polluting industries in the world in fast fashion, making people buy stuff that they didn't really want to.
Making them buy a ton of it, right? Because let's be fair on this. They call it fast fashion for a reason. They don't want you to wear it that
Yeah,
long. They want to manufacture it, pump it out,
exactly.
have you buy it, wear it, and then buy more. So it's even worse than it sounds. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you're exactly right. And every day I used to go to sleep thinking about what exactly am I contributing to, right?
Right.
Where are these products coming from, and where is it going? Every month I have a target to grow my business by 15%, 20%, 30%, and I'm like, okay, fine. I'm making people buy even more of this stuff. And is this really what I want to contribute to?
Right.
And that's the same time. That's the time I decided to take a pause and just think about what exactly I'm doing with, the kind of experience that I have. And I figured that, I should be doing something more sustainable, like Prithvi said.
Yeah.
And that's the same time that both of us sort of got interested in permaculture, systems design, sustainability. We took some time off, volunteered in farms across India, spent the entire time of COVID in different farms across India with hardly anybody around. So we really got to see what it takes to do this. And see, everybody thinks that, you can just quit your job and move on to a farm and live on the mountain.
Yeah.
But I wanted to live that life and see if it was something that I really want to, because everything is nice in theory. And what Prithvi and I found was that it's really, really, really hard. Yeah, make growing food in India with the limited resources that we have and all the challenges around us, it was super hard. So that's sort of when this whole mushroom business started, and that's the sort of when it popped up in our minds.
Okay, so and I mean, and that was also, I think, interesting because, while taking, we come from a largely agrarian society, right? And you have these ideas about how food is grown, and we know that the small farmer is, our greatest resource, but the way actually people are looking at it as a system, and how as the world is changing, are we as a country also looking at that change through incorporating intelligent ways to grow the food, not just, of course, of course, growing, we've got a bunch of resources, I mean, but are we using a lot of that tech, and are we using intelligent systems, not to say that we go down a path that, say, the West has given us, not to say that we create large systems that are completely out of. And I think it was important to really look at the context of what is India, and what is a nation that has a billion people, and how can we use the people as well in a way that is actually intelligent, because that's something we also discovered along the way. And we said, look, if we were to also go and again set up a small farm or by ourselves, what's going to happen to creating more food resources and creating more farmers out there that can actually feed the nation, instead of taking away from, rather than that, adding to it, and building more structures and building more systems that could be adopted. So from that perspective is when we said, okay, now we should really look at it. Yeah.
I love the way you say this, right? So if you go to the United States and watch the development, and we'll use the US as a proxy for not India, yeah, for the Western world, and you
Right.
watch
Yeah.
the development of farming going from small farms, which, like you said, are really hard to do. There's a reason why people wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to farm and go to bed at 6 o'clock, right? First of all, if the sun's not out, it's super hard to farm. Anyway, but how do you, and then this Archer Daniels, Midland, and Monsanto come in and they create all these chemicals for growth, but they also mechanize the farms in a way where the humans are mostly not necessary. They're sitting in a vehicle that's just kind of driving around. And if you go to the United States, there just aren't that many farmers left anymore, which feels like it's okay, but in reality, it's not. So how do you create this balance between using technology to make farming easier, but don't eliminate the human angle here, because you're right. When we separate ourselves from the creation of food, we take it for granted in a way. We forget just how hard it is. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier today, and I made the point that, because we were talking about supply chain, so slightly different topic, but not so far away. But that if we took away the supply chain and then you couldn't get your food, most people couldn't even grow a tomato in their backyard, was the thing that I said, at all. So people should be, and if they're closer to the food production, they would think, oh, this is really hard, so we should value it higher. And I always say this too, that the beginning of the supply chain takes the least amount of money out of the supply chain. And by the time it gets to Whole Foods, you're paying $7 for a tomato, but the guy and the gal that grew the tomato is making 25 cents. So how do you create this balance? And you can use mushroom farming as an example, but it's really just a proxy for the bigger idea of how to create food. But how do you create this balance so that the people that are doing it can have it easier, but that the people that are doing it don't disappear, so that other people can understand the actual value for that food creation? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
Done.
really, really interesting point, because right now, how things are moving in India, I think the only connection, like the US being the best example, the only connection that people have with the food is the price point.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you know. You see a sticker on the supermarket, and that's the only information that you have about the produce.
Yeah.
And that's also the reason why stores like Whole Foods are doing really well, because now people want the story.
Yeah.
They want to know. They've been
Who grew
alienated from
that?
this
Who grew
food. They
that thing?
want
I
to know
want to
where it
know,
came
because I
from.
want to give that guy the money. Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. Right. And you touched on upon a really interesting point. And through Nuvedo, through what we're doing, what we're trying to do through this is, see, mushroom cultivation is highly technical,
Is
right?
it?
It's super technical, and that's the reason that a lot of people are not able to get into it, because there's sterilization, you need HEPA filters, you need autoclaves, you need a bunch of different things. You need to invest a lot of money into buying these things. And after you invest the money, you get trained in using these things. You need a microbiologist or somebody who knows how to handle these equipment on your team. And how many farmers, let's face it, how many farmers can afford all of this, right?
Nobody. Yeah.
And that's where we come in, and we're like, you don't need to do any of this. So we remove the tech, or we remove the hurdles for an average farmer, a person who doesn't know anything about mushrooms. For him to start growing mushrooms is super hard, because the learning curve is very steep.
Mm-hmm.
The technology is super expensive. So what we do is, we remove the tech from the process. We do all the technical aspects of it. We remove the tech, and we supply these grow kits. Basically, essentially what we're doing is, we're working with farmers. We're supplying them with grow kits. And the only thing that they have to do is give it the right conditions to grow the mushroom at home. So now they don't have the risk of their crop failing because of contamination, because that is a major risk in mushroom cultivation, because you lose a lot of crop to other fungi or other pathogens in the environment. And we're removing that risk altogether. He doesn't need to know how the bags are made. We just send the bags to him. They're ready to throw out mushrooms from day one. He's doing 12 cycles instead of 4 cycles in a year. He can grow mushrooms 12 times in a year instead of 3 times. He doesn't have to face any of the risks of contamination. And that's how we're integrating the small farmer into a supply chain, by giving them the technical inputs, training them on cultivation, giving them these grow kits, and buying the mushrooms back from them. So
If they want to.
if they want, yeah.
Building the growth kit. I mean, obviously, you two have done a ton of research. You can talk about that too if you'd like. I mean, I presume that part of the thing that you did during the pandemic, when you were going around to look at all these other farms, was trying to figure out, how can we standardize a process that will make the grow kits give us a consistent output of mushrooms that are not exactly the same, but close enough within a margin of error, right? Just statistically, so that the stuff that comes from over here is the same thing that comes from over there. But then also, how can we create a marketplace and the proper logistics and supply chain to get it from all over India or wherever they're grown into places where people can actually buy them, right? Because I can grow mushrooms in the back with a grow kit, but if it's just for me, that's great. But I can't eat every single mushroom that I grow. So if you're also creating the marketplace, how does all that work as well? Just like logistically, do you know what I mean? And is it mostly for people that were already farming something, or is it for new farmers, or is it both?
To start with, it's mostly for people who are already growing something because we don't want them to exclusively depend on the mushrooms for it. It's more of a supplementary income. That's how we're looking at it. Maybe in the future, when we have the demand, I can reach out to farmers and say, you just do this for us.
Okay.
So right now, it's for people who already have, farmers who already have some income coming in and who want to supplement their income with something extra because mushrooms really don't need a lot of time. They just need a little bit of time in the morning and in the evening and during harvest. During harvest is when there's a lot of labor involved. And the second thing is we work with medicinal mushrooms. So we essentially turn medicinal mushrooms into extracts. That's our core business. So when you're working with functional mushrooms, the raw material, the functional mushroom actually is dried, right? So 90% of the weight of a mushroom is generally water. So what we're doing is we're eliminating the weight, we're increasing the shelf life of the product so that logistics doesn't become an issue anymore. And we do this in small clusters. So we grow mushrooms in places where they can grow naturally because India has been blessed with a diverse climate. Yeah, we have a lot of different climates, and we're essentially trying to figure out, or we and give them the mushrooms that grow well in their location. And then there's a small hub. One farmer acts as a small hub where he collects all the mushrooms from his locality or from around him, and then they ship it out to us when it's ready. And we work with a margin of error because we've done a lot of R&D on these mushrooms, and we know how much they can expect, the bare minimum, and the pricing and the quantities we calculate on the basis of the average or the worst case scenario sometimes. And we're at the pilot stage of this right now, actually.
Okay.
We've got 5, 6 different farms in different parts of the country essentially making mushrooms for us. And we're sort of piloting this to see how well this model can work. And again, a lot of predictions. We look at the weather patterns for the next couple of months to see how well it's going to do. All of these things, it's going to take some fine tuning. And climate change is definitely not making anything easier for us.
Yeah.
So we're working with indigenous strains of mushroom rather than importing strains from the USA, Japan, or China, which may or may not, yeah, it might not do well here. We're trying to find mushrooms which grow naturally in India, which are adapted to the Indian climate, and using materials which we find locally to reduce our carbon footprint.
Right.
Yeah, so I was saying one example of that is a lot of the mushrooms that come, the literature that's around oyster mushrooms, a simple mushroom, is paddy straw. So they say that paddy straw is a substrate that really works well with an oyster mushroom. But in certain states, of course, paddy is grown, but the time it would take to reach you, or by the time you actually have to source it from a farmer, it will probably outweigh the costs. So what we've started doing is we started working with cereal grains that are more readily grown. And for example, ragi is
Millet.
a millet that is traditionally grown in Karnataka, and it is has now started its revival, of course, because people have understood climate change and they realize that this doesn't require, it's a very robust crop, it doesn't require so much water, things like that. So we were anyway already working with ragi, and we've trained a lot of our strains to work on this particular millet. So this is like one kind of an example to demonstrate how we've also been working with locally available substrates rather than using what is always just put out there in literature papers or published and said, this is the ideal substrate for this mushroom.
Yeah, just gonna interject here and say for everybody who's listening and who doesn't know what substrate means, it's the material that you grow mushrooms on. So mushrooms are essentially fungi, and they don't grow the same way that plants do. They're decomposers, so they grow on lignocellulosic waste, which is essentially sawdust or agricultural waste, such as your wheat straw or rice straw, things like that. So what Prithvi was saying is that the material that we use to grow mushrooms, see, the research paper from the USA might recommend oak wood sawdust to grow shiitake, but where am I going to get oak wood sawdust in Bangalore?
Right.
And that's essentially the kind of research that we're doing also to find out ways to come up with use things that are locally available so that we are also sort of reducing the waste which is being generated around and reducing our carbon footprint.
So for both of you, this is actually really important. You just said shiitake, and you know that's a Japanese strain of mushroom, right? I lived in Japan for 22 years. I had a lot of it when I was there. I don't understand the difference, though, between a shiitake mushroom and a regular mushroom, in the sense that I don't know whether it's more nutritional for me. The taste, frankly, is not that different to me. Right? It depends on the way you cook it. But at some level, the Japanese have done a really good job of saying this shiitake mushroom should be more expensive, more, better, whatever it is. Do you think about branding as well? I know it's a little bit off topic from the scientific conversation we've been having, but if you really want to have impact, you want to have more people participating on the other side of the market, on the purchase side of the market. So do you consider branding as well, so you can get to a point where people know the names of the mushrooms that you're developing, or also know the name of Nuvedo? Sorry, you're both looking at each other like, do we yell at him now? Do we punch him? Like, what should we do? But I'm just curious about the branding part of this.
That's a really intelligent question, actually.
And the funny thing is that's something that we are actually spending a lot of time working on in India, because mushrooms are as much Indian as they are Chinese, Japanese, or American. They've
For
been
sure.
there.
Around,
Yeah.
yeah, they're part of the ecosystem. Any ecosystem that's had enough diversity, which India does, has had a bunch of different kinds of mushrooms that have been used. And
Right.
And we have local names too. That's the
Sure.
testament to the fact that these
Of
mushrooms
course.
are a part of our local culture. It's just that, like everything else, we sort of in India accept it after it becomes popular in the US.
Why?
So yeah, exactly. Yeah, same question we ask ourselves every day. So what we've been sort of doing through Nuvedo is trying to revive the story around mushrooms, the Indian story around mushrooms, retelling the Indian narrative by using our names, because language and culture are a way to
huge.
promote this, right? If you want a
Exactly.
person who doesn't know this to use it, it has to first permeate their
Mhm.
life. And food is an emotional topic. It's not just like something that you grab from the shelf. So to get that connection, like you rightly said, we have our local names and we try to use them as much as
You
possible
should.
while we market our produce.
And of course, while that's, it's quite a mammoth task considering India has 100 languages. I mean, we are a nation where in every state, every tribe, every, few kilometers, the language changes and the mushrooms that are used in those
Change.
contexts change.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the, or like he's saying, a huge goal is also to kind of work with researchers as well as start documenting and start to talk about certain kinds of mushrooms, especially the ones that we're working with, from a context of history as well as local cultures. For example, we are home to the largest Adivasi population in the world, which is the tribal population, and we have certain mushrooms that have been used for treating various kinds of ailments. For example, if you think of the Ganoderma species, which is a reishi mushroom, it's been used across tribes in central India. They use it even in the northeast. There are evidences to prove that certain mushrooms that are now coming up as medicinal mushrooms have always had uses for, say, asthma, immunomodulation, skin treatments, as wound healing. And it's only, I mean, these are all there. There's a lot of documented evidence, but it's all in a research paper. Now you tell me which Indian is going to go into a research paper to really understand what's a mushroom. So, kind of breaking down all this information, putting it out there, and you rightly said, I think branding is definitely one aspect of it, where uh, telling the story in different languages too. I think we realize that you start using the name in that language, people are so much more comfortable and so much more at ease with it. For example, one of the things that we also started doing at Nuvedo was we started developing recipes with, say, a shiitake mushroom, but we're going to call it in the language of, say, Kerala, for the state of Kerala, Malayalam. And we kind of created a recipe that was very, in line with that culture. So, for example, we use coconut, we use local ingredients, and we kind of enhance the flavors to create a dish that is very relatable. And it did really well. We've tried it out in, events. We've tried it in flea markets. Even a traditional dish like, not a traditional, but I'd like to say a snack, an Indian snack, a samosa, which is like a folded
Yep.
Yeah, samosa.
You should
It
say
is
no.
fried.
Explain it. You should, just because I know what a samosa is doesn't mean that everybody else does. But explain
Everybody
it.
else. Okay. So if samosa is like a deep fried, filled patty,
Wonton?
like a wonton,
Yeah.
yes, like a fried wonton, but filled with potato and peas and a few masala in it.
It's
But imagine
delicious,
if
by
the
the way.
Yeah, it's
yeah, it
amazing.
is. But imagine if the samosa was filled with a little bit of mushroom too. There, you're also bringing in a snack that's very comfortable for people to eat, but you're introducing a new ingredient there, and that's when people are like, "Oh, mushroom samosa, shiitake mushroom samosa. Wow, that was so
And
good."
again, like the question that we get asked the most is, so do you guys do sell culinary mushrooms, or are you a functional mushroom company? What are you all doing? And what we realized is that to be able to present mushrooms as something that has healing benefits, you have to present mushrooms first. You have to bring the idea of mushrooms as food first, and then you can slowly graduate people into talking about it as medicine. Because here in India, the position that we are in right now, the question that we get asked the most is mushrooms vegetarian or non-vegetarian? It's we have to start there.
Interesting.
So we're doing a lot of things to get people to talk about this, to make them comfortable with the idea of consuming mushrooms, and then slowly making them understand through this process that they have healing benefits and there are a bunch of different things that they're good for, and then you can have extracts. So we try to tell that story with the local context.
Do you feel like there's a secular change taking place in the way people are looking at just medicinal solutions at scale? And again, this may be out of scope, but just work with me for a second. You can look at, big drug companies, whether they're in the US or in Europe or frankly in India as well, which does great research and great production of traditional drugs. But then you can also look, like you said, mushrooms is just one example. Functional mushrooms is just one example of something that tribes and people not in the tribes themselves, but have been using for medicinal purposes for centuries, not just for like 5 days or 5 weeks. Do you feel like there's a movement away from mass produced, existing, very expensive drugs to these medicinal mushroom style solutions to health problems that have been around forever anyway? Do you know what I mean? Do you see people moving back to this?
Right. I think yeah, it's again, like, I think yeah, it works both ways. The big companies are also super interested in these mushrooms because they're like, okay, what's in it that we haven't seen before?
Right.
And then there are people on the other side who are like, okay, fine, I maybe don't want to take something that comes out of a lab or a factory, and I want to grow my own medicine. And all of this came because of COVID,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those 2 years really made people think what they're putting in their bodies and what's the consequence of that.
Yeah.
So I feel like it has to be together. It has to be integrative, and I think that's what's happening, because now we have integrative medicine as a certification course that's happening in top universities in India, where we're looking at an illness or a health condition with Ayurveda and allopathy and traditional Chinese medicine and yoga together, not one against the other. Four experts who come together and they sit and they talk about what's happening to the patient and they try. So I feel like though there are people who are moving away from pharma into home remedies or growing their own food or using herbal remedies, on the larger scale, I feel like the change that can really happen in the market is when they both come together. And
Yeah, and I just wanted to add one point though, like, of course, trajectory, say in India, is that maybe so you can. I mean, we've still not reached the point, I think, where people are rejecting pharma because they're just kind of people are just kind of almost getting access to it in a more comfortable way. Like if you think of the larger population.
right.
So for us to say reject pharma will be maybe many years down the line. But having said that, I think we were always a culture that was using home remedies and creating, for example, Ayurveda, right? A
Yep.
very strong part of the entire nation. And I think this I could say unanimously. So while Ayurveda came again as a big wave in the West, people started rejecting pharma. here what happened is where there is access now and people can actually even the poorest of poor people can have access to medicines, and government has done a lot for that. So we're not there yet where the entire nation per se can start rejecting it yet, because the context is very different. So I see, like, I think what Josh had said, I see a space where there won't be a rejection, but there'll be like this crazy
Synergy.
synergy that might happen,
Yeah.
because we maybe we never went through the phase of, oh, pharma taking over everything and then people going back to
Right.
traditional.
Natural
You get what
remedies
I'm
or
saying?
traditional
Yeah.
remedies. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
part of our culture. It's always been there, right?
Exactly. So it's not like, oh, we had to let go of something to adopt something, but more like, hey, we got access to this, but we still have, these traditional practices. So how do we kind of integrate both? So maybe that would be a way
Better
to
way to look at
get
it.
it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great answer to a really uninformed question. I like it a lot, actually. I really like it. No, I mean, look, ignorance is okay. The reason why I ask questions is because I don't know the answer. I really want to learn, and that's just a killer answer to this. I want to ask you this as well. India is this big, sprawling, sort of culturally, linguistically, and food-wise different country in combination, right, with all the states there. What role does the government, or should the government, play in the kind of thing that you're trying to accomplish in this building of an ecosystem around mushrooms, all the way from helping smallholder farmers grow mushrooms better, all the way to the end of the supply chain? Are there things that the government should do, is doing, that you expect them to do? Do they care? How does this all work as well?
The thing is, the government has been really promoting mushrooms from a cultivation side. Like they give out loans, there are subsidies for farmers to apply to get access to easy credit. But that's all on the supply side, They're helping people to grow a lot of this. They're helping farmers to come out with a lot. But see, you have the world's largest resources out there, and it should be a no-brainer. And the reason why people haven't adopted is because they haven't done enough on the demand
On the
side.
demand
There's
side.
not enough marketing that's happening, and they're not portraying mushrooms in the same way that they did eggs. Because if you look at the poultry industry in India, it's the same situation. If you go back to the 90s, introduced a lot of people into large scale farming of chicken and eggs, and then what happened was everybody was growing it, but nobody wanted to eat eggs because people were not used to having so many eggs in India. And then the government came up with this national level campaign where they said, in Hindi, they said, Sunday hoya Monday, rose khao ande. I still remember it. And it was such a big campaign.
Translate.
Yeah, it says even if it's Sunday or Monday, you have to eat eggs every day. That's what they said. And that campaign just blew up. And
Unbelievable.
so everybody started eating eggs, and something as simple as that. And that was on the radio, on the TV.
Right.
So what we expect, or what we feel like the government should be doing is helping us on spreading awareness about mushrooms, right? So that the consumption can increase. Because India has, I'll give you some statistics. India has a per capita mushroom consumption, yearly annual mushroom consumption per capita of around 80 grams compared to like 3 kilograms in the US.
Wow.
Okay. And that number is as high as 20 kilograms in China.
Yeah.
China is the world's largest producer and consumer of mushrooms. They eat 20 kgs of mushroom per person per year.
Wow.
It's around 3 kilograms per person per year in the US. India is not even at 100 grams, right? So it's clearly a an issue with education and awareness surrounding this food product, basically.
But it sounds to me like it's way more than I expected. Or I expected to have a conversation with you about food, really. But what we've really done is talked about supply chains. We've talked about medicinal qualities. We've talked about science. We've talked about technology. We've talked about ecosystems and marketplaces. And what this means to me is that we don't have enough time. I want to have both of you back, if you don't mind, to talk more about this as your business continues to grow, right? Because as you get more experience helping farmers, building better grow kits, continuing to build the ecosystem and doing more R&D, I want to keep catching up with both of you, if that's okay, and also understand more on the branding side as you continue to build out the brands to see how that's going. I really want to thank both of you for doing this today. Prithvi, Kini, Jashid, Hameed, the co-founders of Nuvedo, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having us. I think I really enjoyed, where this kind of went, and I love that it was just this way of, we went in and out of like, we went macro and then micro, and it was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. Like,
Yeah.
very thought-provoking questions, made us think about a lot of things. And we would love to be back on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would never turn down an opportunity to talk about mushrooms. So you can expect us to be back anytime. Just have to let us know, man.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
Thank